Good morning, math students. Today we are going to learn about simple interest. Simple interest is another very common real-life application using percentages. Before we start solving the math problems with simple interest, we need to know what these vocabulary words mean. Interest is the amount of money paid or earned for the use of money. So there's a couple of different situations here. The money paid would be when you borrow money from, let's say, a bank. The bank charges you for loaning you that money. That is interest. The other situation is if you invest money, you are paid for the money that you are investing. So depending on the situation, it is either money paid or money earned for the use of money. Principal is the initial or starting amount of money that you either borrow or deposit. And then simple interest is money paid or earned only on the principal. When you get older, you'll learn about a little bit more advanced use of interest, and that's called compound interest. For our lesson today, we are going to use the equation I is equal to PRT. And that means that simple interest is equal to the amount of principal multiplied by the annual interest rate, and we'll write that percentage as a decimal before multiplying. And that would be multiplied by the time in years. For the first example, the problem says you put $500 in a savings account. That initial amount of money is your principal. The account earns 3% simple interest per year, so that would be your interest rate. And we are asked A, what is the interest earned after 3 years? And B, what is the balance after 3 years? So this one is pretty straightforward because we are using the equation I is equal to PRT. And since we're solving for the amount of interest earned, we are going to substitute 500 for the principal, 0.03 because 3% is 3/100ths in decimal form. That'll replace the rate. And then the amount of time is 3 years. So now we just multiply these three factors and we come up with 45. So the interest earned is $45 after 3 years. To find the balance, all you have to do is add. Add the interest to the principal. So $45 is the interest accrued, and that is added to the initial amount of 500. So the balance here is $545. The next example says to find the annual interest rate. So here we put $1,000 in an account. The account earns $100 simple interest in 4 years. What is the annual interest rate? We're still using the exact same equation, I is equal to PRT. This time, though, we're told what the interest is, so we'll substitute 100 for I. We will substitute 1,000 for the principal because that was the initial starting amount. The rate is what we are solving for, so R will stay R. And then the time in years is 4. We'll first simplify everything that we can. So when we get to this step, 1,000 and 4 have been multiplied together to get 4,000R. And now we need to isolate the variable, so we would divide both sides by 4,000. That gives us a decimal number of 25 thousandths, 0.025. Since this is a decimal and our interest rate is supposed to be a percent, we just need to multiply 25 thousandths times 100, or shift the decimal to the right 2 places, and the annual interest rate comes out to be 2.5%. Here are a couple of example problems. For this first one, it says, in example 1, what is the balance of the account after 9 months? So I already copied the information from example 1, changing only the amount of time to 9 months. So we'll still use the equation I is equal to PRT. I is equal to PRT. We still need to solve for the amount of interest earned, even though the question is asking for the balance. The reason being is to find the balance, we add the amount of interest earned to the initial principal. So the principal is 500. The rate is 3%, which we will write as a decimal, 0.03. And now, though, the time is 9 months. 9 months has to be converted to the time in years. So I know that 9 months is 9/12 of a year because there are 12 months total in a year. 9/12 can be reduced to 3/4 by dividing both of those numbers by 3. And 3/4 is equivalent to the decimal 0.75. So when I substitute 9/12 for the time, I'm actually just going to go ahead and write that as in decimal form as 0.75 because it's easier to use in my calculator. Now we'll multiply 500 times 0.03 times 0.75. The interest earned on this particular investment is $11.25. Once you know what the interest earned is, you can calculate the balance by adding the amount of interest earned to the principal. 500 plus $11.25 is $511.25. Oops. For the second example, it says you put $350 in an account. The account earns $17.50 simple interest in 2.5 years. What is the annual interest rate? In the example given, $350 is the initial amount that you put in the account, so that would be the principal. The account earns $17.50 in simple interest, so that would substitute I. The time that it takes is 2.5 years, so that would substitute for T. And what we are solving for is R, the annual interest rate. So here we have the equation with everything substituted for the correct variable. 1750 is equal to 350 times R times 2.5. Before we try to isolate R, we should simplify whatever possible. So I can use the commutative property and multiply 350 times 2.5 first, which gives us 875. So now we've got 875. Erase that real quick. 875 multiplied by R is equal to 1750. In order to isolate R, we would have to divide both sides by 875. And when we do that, 1750 divided by 875 works out to be 0.02. That is in decimal form, and we want our interest rate to be in percentage. So we multiply by 100 or shift the decimal 2 places to the right. And the annual interest rate for this particular situation is 2%. The next example is still using the exact same equation, I is equal to PRT, but we're just solving for a different variable. This time we're going to find an amount of time. The example says a bank offers 3 savings accounts. The simple interest rate is determined by the principal. How long does it take an account with a principal of $800 to earn $100 in interest? So the principal amount, $800, would be this middle box that shows it earns 2% interest in that particular bracket of investment. So here we've got I is equal to PRT. We know that the amount of interest we're talking about earning is $100. The principal amount was $800. The annual interest rate based on that investment is 2%, so written as a decimal is 0.02, and we are solving for the amount of time in years. Just like the previous example, we should simplify 800 times 0.02 first, which gives us 16 times T. And now to solve for T, we need to isolate the variable, so we would divide both sides by 16, and that comes out to be 6.25. 6.25 years is 6 1/4 years. A quarter of a year is 1/4 of a year. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. 6 years and 3 months is how long it takes for the account to earn $100 in interest. The previous examples have been investments, mostly savings accounts. Here's an example that we can use when we take out a loan. So, excuse me, in this example, it says you borrow $600 to buy a violin. The simple interest rate that you have to pay on that loan is 15% interest rate. You pay off the loan after 5 years. How much do you actually pay for that loan? We're going to use the same equation, I is equal to PRT. The amount of money that you borrowed is the principal, so that's $600. The interest rate as a decimal is 0.15, and you are taking 5 years to pay off this loan. Once you multiply the amount of interest that it has accrued, meaning that's how much it earned, basically, that's $450. That's the amount of interest that you had to pay on the loan, but you also have to pay back the initial $600. So for this particular loan, you are paying $600 principal back, plus you are paying $450 interest back, for a total of $1,050 for the loan cost. Here's a couple of on your own examples. Number 3 says in example 3, how long does it take an account with a principal of $10,000 to earn $750 in interest? This was the problem where the bank paid different interest amounts based on the initial principal that was invested. So I already substituted $750 for I in the equation I equals PRT. $10,000 was the principal. Based on that amount, the interest rate was 3%, so I wrote that as 0.03, and then times t for time because that's what we're solving for. Just like the previous examples, we want to first simplify 10,000 times 0.03 in order to, or before we start to isolate the variable. So 750 is equal to 300 times t. Now to isolate t or get t alone, we would divide both sides by 300. So 750 divided by 300 will tell us the amount of time. And that works out to be 2.5 years or 2.5 years. In example number 4, it says, what if, in example 4, you pay off the loan after 2 years, how much money do you save? Because you are borrowing money for a shorter period of time, you won't have to pay as much back in the long run. So what I've done is I've already substituted $600 for the loan amount. The violin still has the same initial cost. It's still 15% interest rate, but the time is now 2 years instead of the original 5 years. So to find the amount of interest that we would have to pay on this loan, we're still going to multiply 600 by 15/100 and 2. Now the amount of interest that we have to pay on this loan is $180. The total cost of the loan is the principal, 600, plus the amount of interest that has accrued. So I know that that's $780. Initially, we had to pay $1,050 for this loan. So to see how much money we save, we're going to subtract this amount, 780, from what it was after paying it back over 5 years instead of 2. 1,050 minus 780. And the difference now is $270, so that would be a savings of $270. Okay, to recap, interest is money paid or earned for the use of money. Principal is the initial amount of money that is borrowed or deposited. And to solve these types of problems, we would use the equation I is equal to P times R times T, where I is the amount of interest, P is the principal, R is the interest rate in decimal form, and T is the time in years.